going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we're taking a look at this Bestech Starfighter. Fairly well done titanium frame lock flipper, pretty well has all the things that we expect it to have at this point. And I can just expand this a little. I've only had a few Bestech, so because of my limited experience, I went out and tried to watch some reviews and kind of see what people have been saying out there. And generally speaking, they seem to be doing a pretty good job. The one complaint you'll hear a couple of times is some of these knives seem to have an unrestrained pivot, which, now this one wasn't a problem for me. I was able to adjust it without issue, but that really is a kind of a fail at this point in time. There's really no reason anyone ever should be doing an unrestrained pivot. Okay, sorry, that's a bit of an aside. There were some Bestech knives that had that as a challenge. Getting back to this knife in particular, the one thing I should say is this is one of the color variations. There are a couple of different Bestech Starfighter color options out there. So wanted to make sure that was clear, just in case you may look at this and go, that is the ugliest color. And these colors do kind of clash. I'm not in love with this particular variation, but just know that there are some other options out there if that's kind of your initial response to the knife, because certainly it was mine. So let's go ahead and get into the specifics of this knife, which I have actually found very, very good overall in terms of quality and performance. There's a lot that I do appreciate about this guy, beginning with the size and weight. So let's talk about that first, the way we normally do. 8 3/8 inches is the overall length here. The blade on this guy is going to be 3.5 inches. The handle is 5 inches. All right. And the weight on this is a very attractive 4.2 ounces. 4.2 ounces, guys, for a titanium frame lock of this size is actually really good. And you can see, let's see, hopefully you can see that they have done some internal milling here. It's going to be hard for me to show you. You can kind of catch the back here by my fingers that there is some milling in there. There you go. Now you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So this has been milled out to save weight, and they've done a pretty good job of that. Getting it down to 4.2 ounces is absolutely comfortable. In terms of carrying this around with you all the time, this is a great EDC knife. The size and weight, the slimness in pocket makes this carry very, very comfortably. All right, blade on this guy is S35VN. We've got a drop point blade shape with a high flat grind, but not a full flat grind. Stonewash on the bevels here, satin flats, and the back spine carries over that stonewash as well. You can see first production run there. That's, you know, either here nor there. One thing I will say I like about this is the way they've done the swedge. It still allows me a fair bit of material on the back spine there so that I can get my finger up there, a thumb, or even a forefinger if I'm doing really detailed work. That I really like. The other thing I have to say about this is they've got the plunge grind really well done. There's no smile or anything down here. And honestly, this is something that I don't even know why we're talking about at this point. This is like one of the most simple things to get right, that it just feels like everybody knows how to do a plunge grind or how one's supposed to look. So I really don't understand when people get it wrong. Anyway, that's a little aside there. But the other thing I do really appreciate is the way they've ground this blade with the high flat grind and the swedge here is a really, really nice balance between being really, really good at cutting stuff. Okay, so slicing, it works really well, you know, slicing up apples or something like that. But it also is fairly tough and robust because of the flat grind and because of the extra material carried out here with the swedge. So they've done a really nice job with this blade. It's very useful. It's really well balanced between being tough and durable and thin and slicey. And honestly, guys, I like a thicker blade. We've talked about this before, but in an EDC knife where I never know what I'm going to be doing with it, I want that extra strength in the blade. You know, if I want a paring knife, I can get one out of my drawer and use some kind of really slim, slicey paring knife or something similar to that. In an EDC, I don't want that, right? I want something a little more heavy duty. So they've done a really nice job of giving me a blade here that's got some strength to it, but still cuts stuff really well and is in a really nice steel. S35VN's got great corrosion resistance, great edge retention, just a really well balanced steel, so no complaints whatsoever on the blade. Moving on to lockup and deployment. Again, they've done a pretty darn good job here. I'll talk about the pivot in a second, but the lock bar is easy to access. It's got a stainless steel lock bar insert and an over travel stop, the way we pretty much expect to see these days. Ceramic bearings are quite smooth. The detent is really nice, and the flipper is pretty comfortable. It's a little small, and let's see, can you push button it? Yeah, you can push button or light switch this. fairly comfortably. It's nice and small, so it's not too obtrusive in pocket. And the blade, the lockup is really nice and solid. So overall, I'm definitely a fan of lockup and deployment here. The one thing I will say is when I first got this, there was a little bit of side-to-side play, so I had to tighten this pivot up, which, as you can see, requires, I guess a coin would be the best bet. And that is a little annoying. I don't understand why companies feel the need to do something different here instead of just put a Torx bit on it like everyone else. You know, if you want to stand out with your knife design itself rather than with the tool, the hardware you're using. That's just really annoying to all of us end users who have to take these knives apart and clean them and maintain them. All right, so that's my only complaint is the way they've done that pivot. The other thing is, notice how it's raised. So they've got this pivot collar and then the pivot here, and I feel like this should be flush. I don't know why they've sort of made this almost like a button on the side of the knife. But they have. It doesn't affect ergonomics. It doesn't affect really all that much of anything other than it just seems weird that every single knife makes it flush except the Bestech here where you're like, why did they do it this way? And so that's you know, just my own OCD kind of kicking in and bugging me about that particular choice. All right. Otherwise, lockup and deployment in terms of its function. Okay. Now let's get back to what's real here. In terms of the function of this knife, lockup and deployment is excellent. It flips open nice and reliably. It's smooth as silk. It's solid as a rock when it's opened and in place. And so, you know, those things are all just as they should be. Let's talk a little bit about handle construction here. You can see it's backspacer construction, again, milled out to save weight. They have removed a little bit of material here so that when you flip the knife, your finger sort of has a spot to go into the handle just a little bit, which I do definitely appreciate. In terms of ergonomics, well, I guess we shouldn't go there quite yet. I want to show you the milled out internals one more time just to comment that they've done a good job there. Now we'll talk about a couple of things. This is going to be really, really hard to get paracord through. You're going to have to probably tie it to something and pull it through. Pocket clip is single position milled titanium clip, which does look really cool and works really, really nicely as well. And then we've got this milling pattern, and the milling is honestly something I'm not sure how I feel about. You know, this shape kind of coming down and this being here, you know, I don't know where the inspiration came from for it. I know they call it the Starfighter. I don't know, to me, I don't see a Starfighter shape here anywhere. It just seems... Sorry guys, I nearly sneezed there. It just seems like they've taken random shapes and just cut them into the knife. Like I can't find, you know, I don't follow this in any way. It is more attractive in the other color variations, but even in the other color variations, I'm kind of like, I don't know what you're doing here. Like, why not just make a nice, you know, why have this here at all? Why not just make this a clean handle? And maybe that's just me. You know, my preference is a little more minimalistic than maybe some. And so if you feel like you totally disagree with me on that, feel free to comment down below and say, Kevin, what are you talking about? That is the most beautiful work of art that I've ever seen. To me, I just kind of don't get the need for it. You know, this milling actually adds some texture and adds a spot for your fingers to rest. Well, except for my fingers totally miss it. But I can at least kind of get it a little more than I get the weird blobs of blue here. So aesthetically, I'm not totally in love with this knife. However, the ergonomics are what really win me over. So when you get the knife in hand, it actually is very comfortable. The jimping works just the way you'd want it to. Everything, yeah, it's just a really, really nice feeling knife in hand. There are no hot spots. I can use pretty much any grip I want to on it and it feels good. And so from that aspect, I've got to say the handle is really, really nice. And so while I don't love the way it looks, it definitely feels good in hand. And so, you know, when we get down to, does the knife do what it's supposed to do? Absolutely it does. It feels really, really nice. And in terms of a functional folding knife, I've carried this a lot for that very reason. It's a good sized knife. It's well put together. It does exactly what it needs to do when it needs to do it. And so for those reasons, I really do like the way that they've done this. There have been a couple of comments about being able to touch the blade here at the back. I haven't been able to do that. Now, I suppose if you had really small fingers, but even if you had small fingers, like I can use my pinky finger and touch here just fine. I'm not touching the blade. Could I kind of turn my finger sideways and try to wiggle it down in there? Well, yeah, but I don't know why you would do that in real life. Okay, so to me, that isn't something that I'm overly concerned about. You know, if any, to me, a knife has a problem with that if I can just rub my finger along here and touch the blade. If I just do this lightly, the way I would when I'm putting something in my pocket, yes, then it's a problem. But if I have to actually physically, you know, jam my fingers down in there, then it's no big deal. So that's my overall, you know, covering, you know, that's my take on the details here. Overall, everything is done really, really well. Everything functions the way it's supposed to. I'm not in love with this knife in terms of its looks, but that's a very subjective thing. And so I can't really, you know, say anything about that. You know, maybe you look at this and think it's totally beautiful and you just want me to say, hey, does it function well? And the answer to that question is absolutely yes, it does. So let's go ahead now and get to some comparisons, starting off with a couple of Kaisers. Here is the Kaiser Uprising. I really, you know, this is a knife again that I'm really a fan of. Similar vein, you know, a fairly robust knife. Now this guy is much thicker and blockier, and it's going to appeal probably to a different group of people. Something a little slimmer and more in the same vein as this is going to be the Quicksilver, which again I do really enjoy. What else have we got? Oh, you know what I should do is throw a Rat 1 in here and a Para 2 just for size comparison. So there's a Rat Model 1, and you can see this is a fairly large knife, or I guess a fairly good sized knife. Here is a Para 2. The Para 2 is just going to be a very little bit shorter than the Bestech. Similar vein of knife, I would say, would be the Zero Tolerance 0393, which, you know, similar size, similar blade grind. This is a little more robust blade grind than this is going to slice just a little bit better, but not a whole lot. Okay. What else have we got? Again, for size comparison, let's throw in the Chris Reeve knives in Cosi. Again, one, we've got a titanium frame lock here. Two, this is a knife that everyone is familiar with, so it should give you a good idea of what kind of size you're dealing with. Let me throw in one other knife here. This is the Bestech Paladin, which is part of their sort of more budget-friendly line. And I have to say, guys, I love this knife. They've done a great job with this design. But that aside, this is an example to just bring in the fact that I've got a couple of Bestechs here, and both of them have done a really good job in terms of quality and action and detent and fit and finish and all those kinds of things. So I think that speaks well for the company overall, that I think I've got 3 now that have been really good, and I've watched a number of videos that others have done, and most people seem pretty happy with them. So what do I think of this knife overall? Would I recommend it? Absolutely, I would. If you think this knife is fantastic and you just love the look of it, don't hesitate. It's very nice. They've done a really good job. The ergonomics are good. The blade design is really good. It's comfortable in hand. It's light to carry. I mean, I don't know what more you could want from a knife other than, for me, for it to look a little bit different than this. That's all I've got for you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.